So why would somebody want to move out of Florida? I mean, Florida is gorgeous. I live here in Sarasota, but there's reasons why people are also leaving Florida. The Florida migration has actually been at its highest right around 2022 and 2023. And over the last few years, it's slowing down. So net migration is still higher. Population growth is still higher. It's in the positive. But the number of people moving into Florida has decreased, especially in 2025. Moving in, still positive. So I got to put that out there because otherwise I'm going to get some notes saying that, hey, people are moving to Florida more than they are leaving. Absolutely true. But this video is about the top reasons why some people are leaving. It actually brings me to my first point, and that is homeowners insurance costs has really skyrocketed over the last few years. A lot of it has to do with fraud and of course hurricanes. On average, homeowners insurance costs are way higher than the US average, especially if the home is closer to the coast in an AE zone. Some people are dealing with homeowners insurance costs that may be $10,000. If they're in a flood prone area and they have flood insurance, that could easily be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. DeSantis has done some work towards stabilizing the homeowners insurance market and just recently announced that there's been decreases, mainly because there are more homeowners insurance providers that have actually moved into Florida. And so if we look at, for example, policies held by citizens, it dropped from 1.3 million to fewer than 400,000, which is apparently the lowest it's been over the last 14 years. And that is thanks to the entry of 17 new private insurance companies into the Florida market, which is great news because if there's more competition, more providers, this will give homeowners more choices. And with this competition, typically prices do come down somewhat. Back in the days before the pandemic, Florida was known as one of the most affordable places to purchase a property. It's still more affordable than homes, say, in New York or New Jersey, but it is now tracking the US average median price, which wasn't the case before the pandemic. It was actually below the median price. Depending on where in Florida, homes may have easily doubled over the last 4 or 5 years in median price. People who have held up, maybe they were renting, decided to possibly purchase a home, say even a year or 2 years ago. A lot of them found themselves priced out, especially if they were in that middle income bracket because of the increase in median price, but also with that comes increases in property taxes. On average, property taxes are about 0.9% of the assessed value of the house, and that gets reset every time somebody purchases a new home, unless they have a homestead that can be carried forward. Now, 0.9% is just kind of the Florida average. It could be higher and even lower in some areas in Florida, so you're going to want to check on that. I'm going to give you an example. If a home costs now $700,000, let's just say for simplicity's sake, the property taxes, new buyer coming in is roughly $7,000. If you go back in time, say maybe 4 years ago, that same home could have very well been worth $400,000. So not only was the home much cheaper a few years ago, but property taxes also approximately $4,000. So somebody that is on a strict budget, they're dealing with a lot higher costs. These people may be thinking, I'm getting priced out of Florida. Where should I be moving to where I can actually have a much better standard of life for the income level? Some of them are actually moving to South Carolina, where the typical median price of a home is $307,000, where in Florida right now it's $408,000, which now South Carolina is the #1 place that people have moved to in 2025 with this extra demand. Florida is always going to be Florida. We have some of the most beautiful beaches and lots of them, long coastlines. I just don't think South Carolina in that standpoint can compete with Florida, especially with all these destinations that we have, which are easy for us to travel to as Floridians. So I think that pattern eventually is probably going to get reversed again, but right now that's not the case. Number 3 is hurricanes. It's been almost a year and a half since we've had a hurricane here in Florida. But back in 2024, September, October, we had 2 hurricanes and Tropical Storm Debbie, which was the rainstorm. That in itself caused quite a bit of destruction in terms of flooding. But those people who had to deal with hurricanes, whether it meant their home got flooded or perhaps they had to evacuate, just the evacuation in itself can have an emotional toll because you have to leave your home, you got to find a place to go to that is considered safer, and some people don't have a place to really move into. There's an emotional factor disaster associated with having to go through repeated evacuations, and perhaps people have been stricken by the flooding. Flooding is the worst case scenario when it comes to damage to a home, but also to human life. Unfortunately, back in 2024, the coastlines such as Sarasota coastline up into Bradenton was hit hard, and a lot of people are either moving inland now, right? Those people who suffered flooding related damages, but also a small portion of them are actually saying, you know what, I'm done with Florida. But what is important to notice that disastrous weather patterns can really happen anywhere across the United States, as we have witnessed over the last few years. Next up is condos. So back in 2021, I believe it was, the Surfside building in Miami unfortunately collapsed. Since then, they passed the Surfside bill, which posed a mandate on older buildings, 3 stories and higher, to ensure that they were going through inspections and had enough reserves to make repair work to the building as necessary. And that, over the last few years, put a lot of pressure on these types of condos to stock up the reserves, and some of them may have been underfunded for years. And so all of a sudden, to ensure that they had enough reserves in place, many of them may have had to pass assessment fees of $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, really depended on the situation, but also condo fees going up. Those that were mainly impacted are condo owners that are retired on a fixed income, who now all of a sudden were forced to sell their condo at a massively reduced price because they just couldn't afford paying up what they had to pay up. A lot of these condo owners, as they were selling off their condos, they may have found a better place outside of Florida. Plus, the experience having gone through this wasn't one that was a good experience for them. The population surged during the height of the COVID crisis, especially back in 2021 and 2022, and actually went into 2023 as well. And that put a lot of pressure on housing prices here in Florida, but also because of the population increases, it added to the already bad traffic in such places such as Miami or maybe Tampa. Even here in Sarasota, which is a smaller city, I can feel the traffic patterns have changed quite a bit. The number of people moving into Florida is drastically lower, as I mentioned earlier. And as a matter of fact, in 2025, it was down to approximately 22,000 people. Just in comparison, so you know, in 2022, it was 310,000 people that moved to Florida. Well, it's much slower now, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that the international folks that were making up 90% of those moving into Florida, they have dropped off. But the fact is that population growth is still positive, and traffic overcrowding in some areas can be pretty bad, especially in Miami, which was always historically more trafficy. But now it's even worse. And so the traffic is also noticeably different in Orlando, in Tampa, in Sarasota, even where I live in, which is the smallest city in Southwest Florida. I've been here for 15 years, and I can absolutely see the change in traffic. And I have to really get down to the point where I schedule my trips, because I don't want to get stuck in traffic, especially during rush hour. And so for somebody who can't get used to the traffic pattern changes and who's looking to live somewhere that's just a little bit less dense, they're either looking to relocate to a place in Florida where it is just a little bit less populated, or they're leaving Florida altogether to find a place that is more along their own speed. Florida has a really strong job market, especially in areas such as tourism and construction and healthcare. But in areas such as tech and finance, for example, if somebody is looking to get to the next step in their career and they're growth-minded, they may actually find better opportunities in New York or in California, Silicon Valley. They're looking to grow in their career. That could very well take them outside of Florida and back to another state. And remote work opportunities open up so many opportunities for people, especially in 2021 and 2022, to move down to Florida while still being employed somewhere up north or maybe somewhere on the west. But what we're seeing now is that a lot of these people are being asked to go back into the office. And so with that, they're going to have to move closer to where their office is to be able to should be in the office. Climate change. Look, not everybody believes in climate change, but I would say a big portion of the U.S. population does. If they have experienced the hurricanes in Florida, especially in 2024, which was just one after another, they may now have that anxiety, and if they believe in climate change, they may be thinking that it's going to happen again, and perhaps it's going to be even worse in the future. And so because of that climate change anxiety, that may take them outside of Florida into places which they may perceive as being safer off. But like I said earlier, climate-induced disasters can really happen anywhere in the United States. I don't want to talk too much about politics, but I think it's an important one because it may not be a financial driver, but it certainly could be a factor for some of why they want to leave Florida. And it really comes down to certain residents don't have a positive view of what Ron DeSantis is doing and his policies here in Florida. And so if that's the case, Florida tends to be very much a red state. Well, they're leaving Florida to move somewhere where they just feel it's more in line with their cultural alignment. That's what I'll say about that. And lastly, Florida is a very tropical place. With that comes heat, of course, hurricane, but also insects and bugs and gators if you're closer to a lake. Just know what you're getting yourself into, especially when it comes to the heat and the weather patterns. The worst weather patterns is going to be in the summer. And so I tell people, before you move here, before you make the decision to purchase here, if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, come and visit Florida, not in the winter, but in the summertime, maybe in July or August. Stay here for 2 or 3 weeks and see if you can actually handle the heat, the humidity, and the constant rainfalls that we have throughout the summer, which may just last 1 hour, but it rains quite a lot. The winters, which is typically when people will come on vacation here from up north, that's the best time to be here in Florida. Of course you're gonna fall in love. The summers tend to be a little different. Now, I come from New York. I prefer the heat in the summer in Florida any day over the winter in New York, but that's my own impressions. You're going to have to find your own. So in summary, the people who are moving out of Florida can be clustered into 3 groups. Middle income folks, retirees, and also those remote workers who are being called back into the office. And remember that there's more people moving into Florida versus out, so it's still net positive migration. Look, Florida is a beautiful place. Come and experience it. You may love it just as much as me. And if you're somebody that's interested in Southwest Florida, Sarasota living, feel free to call me anytime. Thank you again. I wish you all a great day.